Texas Senator Phil Gramm met briefly with supporters at the airport in Manchester, telling them he's still in the race, but under questioning admitting he's taking another look at possibly pulling the plug.
Are you in here for the duration? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I think every candidate has got to look at where they are week to week in the campaign. I don't think anybody other than just engaging in bravado can say that they're going to be a candidate when we get to the national convention. My guess is there's only going to be one candidate at that point. I think people have to look at where they are. I think they owe that to their supporters. And that's what we're going to do. Thank you very much. Thank you guys very much.
How you doing? Good. I'm doing good, pretty good too. I got a bad cold though.
The man who got the big bounce out of Iowa was shaking hands with a future voter on a stopover in Detroit. In contrast to the millions spent by Gramm and Steve Forbes, Buchanan ran a low-budget campaign. That's why he flew to New Hampshire on a commercial carrier rather than charter. And in an exclusive interview, he said, with Gramm out of the picture, Texas should be wide open.
Listen, Texas is good conservative country. That's Buchanan country. I think we can do very well with Texas Republicans and conservatives. I remember my old boss, Ronald Reagan. He swept through there and got 100 delegates, every single one against Gerald Ford when he was challenging Mr. Ford when he was president of the United States. I think Pat Buchanan's social conservative, economic conservatism, I think it plays very well down there in Lone Star State.
Arrest all these people.
Well, they're pretty close, sir. How you doing? Sir, they want us to go across the street. I mean, you want to go over and stand across the street? Or...
Is that a problem doing it
Sir,
here?
is that okay? Thank you. Senator, hi.
What's the status on your campaign?
Well, obviously, we did not win a resounding victory in Iowa last night. I repeated the third grade, but I know that fifth is not first. I went to New Hampshire this afternoon as we had scheduled to go. I repeated the third grade, but I do know that coming in fifth is not as good as coming in first. That much is clear. But in terms of where we go from here, what our strategy is going to be, it's my plan as of this moment. I'm scheduled to be back in New Hampshire tomorrow. We might go to Arizona. We might go to South Carolina. There's been some talk of moving the Texas primary to next Monday. I mean, there are a lot of options that are open out there.
Phil Gramm, finishing a disappointing fifth, never seemed to make that personal connection that would bring enthusiastic voters to the caucuses for him.
Phil, I think, is learning that after raising $20 million, the Beatles were right. Can't buy me love.
Media consultant Michael Shannon tried, even in 1990, to exploit the perception of Gramm as mean with Senate candidate Hugh Parmer.
Texans want a senator that knows the difference between being tough and being a bully.
Parmer, though, lacked the means.
I think it's going to break in my favor.
Phil Gramm had the money and organization, and he spent 70 days in Iowa. A veteran of Republican presidential campaigns, though, agrees it takes more.
But it's that intangible connection that a politician has to make with somebody who's going to vote for him that he just doesn't seem able to make.
Gramm tried to put on a human face, campaigning with wife Wendy at his side. The Texan often joked about her initial reluctance to marry him.
I know looking at my face, it's hard to believe that.
He's one of these politicians who is much better in private than he is in public, and that's a tragedy if you're selling yourself on the basis of your public persona. And Phil Gramm's problem is vague enough, serious, but vague enough, that it's a difficult problem to fix.
Shannon, who mostly works for Democrats, thinks he knows. It seems that everything Gramm does, he says, points towards the presidency.
I would tell Gramm to work for something else. Everything he's done up till now has kind of been for Phil Gramm. I would have him take a cause, for example.
Thank you, guys.
Texas Senator Phil Gramm at this hour is considering whether to drop out of the presidential race. Gramm today cut short his campaign trip to New Hampshire to return to Washington, where he's meeting with his top advisors on his future in the race. The Texas senator finished a disappointing fifth in last night's Iowa caucuses and let his feelings show as he thanked his Iowa supporters.
I have grown to know and to love the people of this state, and I am very, very grateful for those who worked for me, for those who supported me, and I leave this state with a heart full of love.
Graham's conservative message has given way to that of repeat presidential contender Pat Buchanan. Buchanan embarrassed Gramm in Louisiana last week and may have polished off Gramm's hopes with a close second-place finish in Iowa last night. Today, Senator Gramm says it's time to consider his options.
You would have to be brain dead not to take a look at where you are and what you're doing. And I think that one of the things that we're going to try to do this afternoon and tonight is to take a look at where we are, to try to take a look at what our strategy is.
Several of Gramm's top advisors have urged him to drop out of the presidential race and concentrate on again winning his Senate seat. Gramm is expected to announce soon, no later than tomorrow, whether he will continue his efforts to be the GOP standard-bearer against President Clinton in November. Tracy Rowlett, Channel 8 News.
But the choices we finally make in November 1996 will determine the character of our nation and the future of our children long into the next century.
And if they're united here, we can win. But if we're divided, then we risk losing the agenda in which we all believe.
I want to congratulate Senator Dole on his victory. I want to congratulate the other candidates. I want to say to the people of Iowa, it has been a great privilege for me to be here.
Phil Gramm arrived back in Washington at mid-afternoon, not talking yet like he's out.
I wouldn't have gone to New Hampshire this morning if I weren't running.
Gramm said he'd go back in the morning, but he admitted after finishing 5th in Iowa, his campaign would reassess everything.
We might go to Arizona, we might go to South Carolina. There's been some talk of moving the Texas primary to next Monday. I mean, there are a lot of options that are open out there.
And what Gramm must consider is what Pat Buchanan did, which is take much of the religious conservative vote in Iowa and Louisiana the week before, the votes Gramm needed.
But these people look at him and they say, yes, you're with us on the issues, and indeed you always have been. But when we look at you, we don't sense the concern about our concerns that we think a candidate we want to support should have.
Gramm didn't say it here, but clearly one of the options is whether to drop out. Can the campaign be reignited?
All hope springs eternal.
Texas Senator Phil Gramm came to New Hampshire politically horsewhipped. He was hammered in the Iowa caucuses. He wanted to finish in the top 3, but came in 5th. And if you look beyond the headlines, Bob Dole beat him in every one of the state's 99 counties. He beat Pat Buchanan in only 1 county and Lamar Alexander in only 9.
When you run 5th in Iowa, an important state, you would have to be brain dead not to take a look at where you are and what you're doing. And I think that one of the things that we're going to try to do this afternoon and tonight is to take a look at where we are, to try to take a look at what our strategy is.
So Gramm will check his bank account, the polls, and his own pulse to see if he'll continue to do what Iowa's big bounce benefactor is doing. And in an exclusive interview, Pat Buchanan says one of the messages out of Iowa is a rejection of negative advertising.
It's a rejection of negative advertising and the relentlessness of it and the crabbiness of it. But it's also another statement. The Republican Party wants a leader other than Bob Dole.
If Bob Dole feels Pat Buchanan nipping at his heels, he doesn't show it. He picked up support at the Goffstown Fire Department, and in perhaps a veiled reference to the missing Phil Gramm, said New Hampshire voters may find the ballot getting thinner.
Got a lot of good candidates on the Republican side. Maybe not as many as there were before Iowa yesterday.
Phil Gramm came to New Hampshire with little hope in a state he'd angered when his campaign tried to engineer an earlier primary elsewhere. He'd been beaten up in his own neighborhood and humiliated in Iowa.
When you run 5th in Iowa, an important state, you would have to be brain dead not to take a look at where you are and what you're doing.
Bob Dole returned to where he cratered in 1988, but apparently, referring to Gramm, said New Hampshire voters may find the ballot getting thinner.
A lot of good candidates on the Republican side. Maybe not as many as there were before Iowa yesterday.
When Gramm returned to Washington at mid-afternoon, he sounded as if he hadn't given up.
I wouldn't have gone to New Hampshire this morning if I weren't running.
But by the end of the day, Gramm was phoning supporters, and some told reporters later Gramm said he'd quit. Conservative Pat Buchanan stands to gain most, and in an exclusive interview called Texas Buchanan Country.
I remember my old boss, Ronald Reagan. He swept through there and got 100 delegates, every single one against Gerald Ford when he was challenging Mr. Ford when he was president of the United States. I think Pat Buchanan's social conservative, economic conservatism, I think it plays very well down there in Lone Star State.
There were no confirmations out of Gramm. Ask on Wednesday, he said.
If you want to come cover me, I'll be there. Thank you. Thank you a lot.
Right after the Iowa results came in, many of Gramm's Texas supporters began telling him to come home. The message, tilting at presidential windmills, could cost him in his own Senate race. Jim Fry, Channel 8 News, Washington.